Thank you. Mr. Forbes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and Madam Secretary General, thank you for being here. General, it's my understanding from previous discussions we've had that these cuts and all of the budget uncertainty is taking a bit of a impact on your morale and your ability for retention. Is that accurate?
Sir, we have not really seen a problem with retention to this point. I'm worried about a problem with retention over time, especially as the uncertainty continues, and that's why we need to have a firm way forward, a number we can count on, and then aim toward the Air Force of the end of sequestration and make it the best it can be starting now.
And I agree with you, because all the platforms we have come down to personnel sometime. And Madam Secretary, you're shaking your head. Let me tell you an item, though, that's of major concern to me. Recently, we read this week where a cadet at the Air Force was forced to take a Bible verse off of a private whiteboard in his room. The facts that I've received from the Air Force, so these aren't hypotheticals, is that this cadet had no intention to offend anyone or any group. Number two, that the private whiteboards have long been used to display items reflecting their personality and from which they draw personal inspiration. Number three, they've long been used for citing inspirational quotes. And fourth, this is perhaps the most offensive. The Air Force said this was a teaching moment, that the cadet's action in putting the Bible verse on was inappropriate based upon leadership principles. General and Madam Secretary, that cadet's family, the other cadets who are now putting up Bible verses and verses from the Koran can't stand in front of you today, but I can. And here's the question I have for you. Can you tell me any other inspirational quotes that cadets have been forced to remove from their personal whiteboards other than verses from the Bible, one? And second, I want to point out this to you. General, when you come in my office, I chair the Sea Power Subcommittee. Over the door you walk through, I have our national motto, "In God We Trust." Mr. McIntyre, the ranking member of this committee, has that same motto over his door. Mr. Miller, who chairs the VA committee, has "In God We Trust" up in his office. Mr. Conaway, who chairs the ethics committee, has it up in his office. Mr. Whitman, who chairs the readiness subcommittee, has it up in his office. Dr. Fleming has it up in his office. Chairman of the government reform committee is putting it up in his office. Chairman of the Ways and Means committee in his office. Speaker of the House in his office. And here's the question I ask for both of you two today. Give us that teaching moment of, one, how that's any different than this cadet putting his own personal verse on his own personal whiteboard, and number two, how is that offensive to leadership principles?
So perhaps I'll start, if it's all right, Mr. Forbes.
Sure.
And Chief, you jump in. I read this in the press as well, and I did have a chance to talk to General Johnson yesterday to say kind of what's going on with this. So I want to share with you what she shared with me in terms of how this incident actually unfolded. So I'll get to that in just a second. But first, if I may, I just want to read the policy of our Air Force about the religious freedom. Leaders at all levels must balance constitutional protections for an individual's free exercise of religion and other personal beliefs and its prohibition against governmental establishment of religion. For example, they must avoid the actual or apparent use of their position.
Madam Secretary, I don't want to cut you up, but I only have a minute and 15 seconds. Can you answer the question for me? What other quotes have ended cadets been forced to pull off of their whiteboards that were not Bible verses?
So I don't know, but the real point I wanted to just, if I may, apparently a cadet went to this other cadet who and said, "This makes me uncomfortable," and that cadet voluntarily took it down.
No, that's not true.
Ordered.
By your own facts, Madam Secretary, if you read what your liaison officer has given to me, the entire Air Force chain of command in that particular situation, that's what he says, if maybe it was inaccurate, and the Air Force commander is what I'm given by facts from your office, went to that cadet, and then they say when all of them come to him, he voluntarily did it. Can you imagine a young cadet when he's forced with the entire chain of command coming in there and telling him basically this is inappropriate? That's what your folks are citing to me, that it was inappropriate based on leadership principles. And at some point in time, Madam Secretary and General, I'm just telling you, we need to stand up for these cadets' rights too. Freedom of religion and their exercise of that, whether they're putting it from the Quran or the Bible, is not to make sure no person on the planet is offended. It's to say that cadet ought to have the right in their own personal board to put that verse up there. And help me with this. Why, if he is wrong, aren't all of us wrong in putting "In God We Trust" up in our office?
So my facts come from General Johnson, so I apologize. I have not seen the paper that you're looking at. What I just explained is the way that General
My
Johnson...
time's out, but I hope you guys will come back to us on this, and for once, the Air Force starts standing up for these cadets and their rights instead of just constantly saying, if anybody at all opposes it, we're going to make them take these things down. And, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Mr. Chairman, may I very briefly answer the question? I've been a commander of a cadet squadron at the Air Force Academy. I've been the commandant at the Academy. We remove hundreds of quotes from those boards because they're not in their room, Congressman. They're in the hallway. They're used for both personal and professional messaging, just to make sure we all understand that context. What you said is absolutely true. Every cadet has a right to free religious expression. But if someone else comes to them and says, that bothers me, and they have that discussion, if that's what happened, I would compliment both of them. We got to get the facts straight. General Johnston has been doing that, sir, and I'll come make sure.
And, General, my time is up, but I want to just respond since you had extra time. First of all, it's different if they just have a one-on-one discussion. That's not what happened. It says the chain of command came to this cadet. And, again, I'm just going by what your office has given me facts on. If the facts are wrong, I can't answer that. The second thing is you can't have it both ways. You can't say we forced other people to take these quotes off, but yet this was voluntarily done. And I think if you ask this cadet and the other cadets, they don't believe it was voluntarily done. But with that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you. Mr. Larson.
General Welch,